The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Chief Okoro's mansion as Amara's trembling hands scraped perfectly good food into the waste bin. Her stomach cramped, not just from hunger, but from the physical pain of watching enough food to feed her entire family for a week disappear into the garbage. Rice, plantains, half a roasted chicken. Amara's fingers tightened around the expensive china plate, fighting the urge to wrap the leftovers in her apron and run. But she couldn't. Not with Adana, the head housekeeper, watching from the doorway with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Hurry up, girl," Adana barked. "Chief has guests coming for dinner, and this kitchen needs to sparkle." Amara nodded silently, her throat too tight to speak. Through the kitchen window, she could see Chief Okoro in his garden, massive gold rings glinting as he gestured to his landscaper about some new exotic plants he wanted imported. The contrast made her dizzy. Here was a man who spent more on foreign flowers than her village saw in a month. Back home, her grandmother was probably boiling cassava leaves again, trying to make them last another day. Her siblings, Chidi, Zara, and little Kenzo, would be watching the pot with hollow eyes. The drought had killed their crops 3 seasons running now. The village well was down to mud, yet here in the mansion, water flowed freely from golden taps. Fresh fruits overflowed from crystal bowls. The air itself smelled different, like spices and meat and wealth. Sometimes Amara felt she was living in 2 different worlds, straddling a chasm between feast and famine. She remembered the day she'd gotten this job, how proud Mama Zainab had been. Our Amara, working in Chief Okoro's house. The whole village had celebrated, certain their fortunes would change. 3 months later, Amara still hadn't seen a single paycheck. Chief Okoro always had excuses. Business was slow, payments were delayed, next week for certain. The other staff seemed used to it. Olayinka, the cook, just shrugged when Amara asked about wages. "Be patient," she'd said. "Chief pays eventually. Better than no job at all." Easy for her to say. Olayinka got to take home leftover food, but Amara was just a cleaning girl, lowest rank. She wasn't allowed to touch anything meant for eating. In the corner, the waste bin filled up day after day. Sometimes Amara caught glimpses of Chief Okoro's business partners leaving after their lavish lunches, men with thick necks and expensive caps who talked loudly about profit margins while village children went to bed hungry. The injustice of it all sat like a stone in her chest. But what could she do? Her family depended on the promise of eventual payment. Her grandmother's medicines weren't free. Her siblings needed school fees. So, Amara kept her head down and worked, ignoring the gnawing in her belly, trying not to count the days since her last real meal. "Girl, are you deaf?" Adana's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "I said the dining room needs setting. Chief's guests arrive in an hour." Amara startled, nearly dropping the plate. "Yes, ma'am. Right away." As she hurried to fetch the fine tablecloth and crystal glasses, Amara caught her reflection in one of the mansion's many mirrors. A thin face looked back at her, cheekbones too sharp, eyes too old for 19. But she held herself straight like Mama Zainab taught her. Dignity, her grandmother always said, costs nothing but feeds the soul. Still, dignity wouldn't feed her family. And watching another feast being prepared while her own stomach cramped with hunger, Amara wondered how much longer she could bear this double life, serving abundance while living in want, watching waste while her village starved. Little did she know everything was about to change, but not in any way she could have imagined. 3 days had passed since Amara's last proper meal. A handful of cassava shared with Kenzo when he'd cried from hunger. Now her hands shook as she arranged Chief Okoro's elaborate feast, the rich aromas making her dizzy with want. The dining room table groaned under its burden. Jollof rice garnished with fresh herbs, pepper soup steaming with goat meat, grilled fish in spicy sauce, plantains fried golden brown. Chief Okoro was hosting the Merchants Association, men who, like him, controlled the region's trade routes. Everything had to be perfect. "More palm wine," Olenka called from the kitchen. "And mind you, don't spill it like last time." Amara steadied herself against the wall, black spots dancing before her eyes. The room swayed like a canoe on rough water. She'd been feeling weaker each hour, but couldn't risk showing it. Adana had already sent 2 maids home this month for being unfit for service. "Girl, the wine!" Forcing her legs to move, Amara fetched the clay jug. The rich liquid sloshed as she poured, her vision blurring. 1 cup. 2. 3. By the 4th, her hands were trembling so badly she had to pause. Amara! Olayinka appeared in the doorway, frowning. What's taking so long? Chief's guests are arriving soon. Sorry, The room tilted sharply. Amara grabbed the table's edge, sending a spoon clattering to the floor. Olayinka's expression softened slightly. Go clean the upstairs bathroom. I'll finish here. Grateful for the reprieve, Amara climbed the mansion's grand staircase, each step requiring more effort than the last. The bathroom's white tiles spun beneath her feet as she worked, scrubbing mechanically while her empty stomach cramped. The sound of voices drifted up from below. Chief Okoro's booming laugh, the murmur of his guests arriving. The feast would be starting soon. Amara slumped against the bathtub, too dizzy to stand. Just a short rest, she told herself. Just 5 minutes. When she opened her eyes, the house was quiet. How long had she been unconscious? Panic shot through her as she stumbled downstairs. The dining room was empty. Dirty plates scattered across the table. She'd slept through the entire dinner. But there, on a plate near Chief Okoro's seat, lay an almost untouched portion of jollof rice and fish. The sight broke something inside her. Before she could think, Amara found herself sitting in his chair, bringing a spoonful of rice to her mouth. The taste exploded on her tongue. Spices, meat, life itself. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she ate, unable to stop. Another bite. Another. The fish melted in her mouth, rich and sustaining. For the first time in days, the gnawing emptiness began to recede. Well, what do we have here? Amara froze, the spoon halfway to her mouth. Chief Okoro stood in the doorway, his massive frame blocking the exit. His expression was unreadable in the dim light. The spoon clattered to the plate. Amara slid from his chair, legs buckling as she dropped to her knees. Chief, please. I'm sorry. I was so hungry. The words tumbled out between sobs. 3 days without food. My family. Please don't. Stand up. She struggled to her feet, expecting a slap by a termination, maybe even arrest. Instead, Chief Okoro was studying her with an odd expression. 3 days without food? His voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. Explain. So she did. The words poured out about the drought, her grandmother's illness, the unpaid wages, her siblings going to bed hungry. Through it all, Chief Okoro listened in silence, his face growing increasingly troubled. When she finished, he pulled out his chair, the same one she'd been sitting in, and sank into it heavily. For a long moment, he stared at the half-eaten food on his plate. Your village, he said finally. How many families? 43, Chief. He nodded slowly, as if coming to a decision. And all of them are starving? Yes, Chief. The drought? Tomorrow, he cut her off, you will take me there. I want to see this with my own eyes. Amara blinked in confusion. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected. Was this a trick? A cruel joke before punishment? But something had changed in Chief Okoro's face. Something that looked almost like shame. The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when Chief Okoro's Mercedes crawled along the dusty road to Amara's village. She sat rigid in the back seat, hands folded tightly in her lap, still unable to believe that the previous night hadn't ended in her dismissal. How much further? Chief Okoro asked, frowning as his expensive car navigated another pothole. Just beyond those baobab trees, Chief. Amara's voice was barely a whisper. The closer they got to home, the tighter her chest became. When they crested the final hill, Chief Okoro's sharp intake of breath told her he was seeing what she saw daily, a village being slowly erased by drought. The once green valley was now a bowl of dust. Withered corn stalks rattled in the hot wind like skeleton fingers. The stream where she'd played as a child had shrunk to a muddy trickle. Stop the car, Chief Okoro commanded his driver. They watched as women trudged along the path to the distant well. Empty jerry cans balanced on their heads. Children with distended bellies played listlessly in the shade. An old man sat outside his hut, staring at the cloudless sky as if willing it to rain. This, Chief Okoro's voice faltered. This is where you live? Before Amara could respond, a small figure came tearing across the dusty ground. Sister! Sister! Little Kenzo, all knobby knees and 2 big eyes, stopped short when he saw Chief Okoro. The boy's excitement melted into fear as he backed away from the imposing man. It's okay, Kenzo. Amara said softly, reaching for her brother's hand. Chief Okoro has come to see our village. More villagers were emerging from their homes now, drawn by the unusual sight of such an expensive car. Amara saw the moment Chief Okoro noticed their gaunt faces, their patched clothes. His own face darkened with something that looked like recognition. "Show me everything," he said quietly. So she did. They walked past the empty granaries, the dried-up gardens, the school where half the children had stopped attending because they were too weak to concentrate. At each stop, villagers gathered cautiously, whispering among themselves. When they reached Mama Zainab's hut, Amara's grandmother was waiting outside, straight-backed despite her illness. She bowed slightly to Chief Okoro, dignity intact even in poverty. "Welcome to our humble home, Chief," she said, her voice steady. "We have little to offer, but what we have is yours." Something flickered across Chief Okoro's face. Pain, perhaps, or memory. He touched the gold rings on his fingers absently. "Mama," he said, "tell me about the drought. When did it begin?" As Mama Zainab spoke of 3 failed rainy seasons, of wells running dry, of children growing weak, more villagers gathered. Each had a story to add. The farmer who'd lost his entire herd, the widow supporting 5 children by selling firewood, the teacher who hadn't been paid in months but kept teaching anyway. Chief Okoro listened, his expression growing darker. When the village elder, Babajide, mentioned that 3 neighboring villages were in similar straits, the merchant's hands clenched into fists. "And no help has come?" he demanded. "No government assistance? No aid from wealthy merchants like myself?" The bitter laughter that met his question seemed to strike him like physical blows. "Help," someone called from the crowd. "The only help we see is when our children go to work in big houses like yours, Chief, and even then..." The speaker fell silent, but the accusation hung in the air. Amara watched Chief Okoro closely. She saw him take in the empty grain stores, the listless children, the desperate faces. But more than that, she saw him fighting some internal battle. His hands kept straying to his gold rings, his expensive watch, his silk shirt. Finally, he turned to her. "Yesterday you ate from my plate because you were starving. But you're not the only one, are you? This entire region..." "No, Chief," Amara said softly. "I'm not the only one. Every day, I watch food being thrown away in your house that could feed families here. Every day, I serve feasts while my brother cries from hunger. Every day." She stopped, realizing she'd spoken more boldly than a maid should. But Chief Okoro wasn't angry. Instead, he looked haunted. "My mother," he said suddenly, his voice rough. "She grew up in a village like this. She used to tell me stories about the drought years, about watching her siblings waste away while the wealthy merchants in town grew fatter." He laughed bitterly. "And now look at me. I've become exactly what she despised." The crowd had grown silent, watching this powerful man grapple with his conscience. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "Chief," Mama Zainab said gently, "it's not too late to honor your mother's memory." He stood there for a long moment, looking out over the drought-stricken village. Then, slowly, he began removing his gold rings, one by one. "No," he said finally, "it's not too late at all." The journey back to Chief Okoro's mansion was silent, but Amara could almost hear the wheels turning in her employer's mind. His fingers, now stripped of their gold rings, drummed restlessly on his knee as he stared out the car window at the passing landscape of suffering. That evening, Chief Okoro called an emergency meeting with his business partners. Amara served tea with trembling hands as the merchants filed into the study. Chibueze with his ever-present ledger, Olumide adjusting his expensive cap, Taiwo already complaining about the late hour. "What's this about, Okoro?" Chibueze demanded, settling his considerable bulk into a leather armchair. "Some of us had dinner plans." Chief Okoro stood at the window, his back to them. The sunset painted his silhouette in shades of gold and shadow. "I saw something today that changed everything," he began. As he described the village's condition, Amara watched the other merchants' faces. Boredom, dismissal, irritation. Only when Chief Okoro mentioned converting their warehouse into a food distribution center did they show real emotion. Alarm. "Have you lost your mind?" Chibueze slammed his ledger shut. "Our profit margins are already tight with the drought affecting transport costs." "Exactly." Chief Okoro turned to face them. The drought. While we feast, children are starving less than 20 kilometers from here. My own workers, our workers, can't feed their families. That's not our concern, Olumide said smoothly. We're businessmen, not charity workers. Besides, if we start giving away food, where does it end? Amara, forgotten in the corner, watched Chief Okoro's shoulders tense. Where does it end? He repeated softly. Perhaps it ends with us sleeping better at night. Perhaps it ends with us honoring our mothers who raised us to be better than this. The mention of mothers caused a subtle shift in the room. Taiwo, the youngest partner, looked down at his hands. But Chibueze wasn't finished. Your mother? He scoffed. Your mother would want you to throw away everything you've built? The contracts with Lagos? The export deals? My mother, Chief Okoro's voice cracked slightly, would be ashamed of what I've become, of what we've all become. He crossed to his desk and pulled out a stack of photographs, pictures he'd taken in the village that morning. One by one, he laid them out. Children with hollow eyes, empty grain stores, dried up wells. Look, he commanded. Really look. These could be our families. In another life, this could have been us. The merchants shifted uncomfortably. Amara held her breath as silence filled the room. Finally, Taiwo spoke. What exactly are you proposing? We convert the Western warehouse into a distribution center. Use our transport network to bring in food and supplies. Fair prices for those who can pay, assistance for those who can't. We have the infrastructure, we just need to change how we use it. You'll bankrupt us all, Chibueze warned, but his voice held less conviction. No. Chief Okoro's eyes lit up with sudden passion. We'll create new markets, build trust, invest in communities that will remember who helped them when times were hard. Think long term, not just next quarter's profits. He laid out more details, plans forming even as he spoke, using their existing delivery routes, starting small, expanding gradually, building something sustainable, not just charitable. Amara watched in wonder as the atmosphere in the room slowly shifted. Taiwo started taking notes. Olumide's objections became questions about logistics. Even Chibueze's scowl softened slightly. But then he asked the crucial question, and what about our other partners? Our suppliers? The big buyers in Lagos? They won't understand this. Transformation. Chief Okoro smiled, not his usual confident smirk, but something gentler. Perhaps it's time they learned to understand. Perhaps it's time we all did. The meeting continued late into the night. Not everyone was convinced. Chibueze still grumbled about profit margins, and Olumide worried about setting dangerous precedents. But something had changed. A seed had been planted. As Amara cleared away the teacups later, Chief Okoro stopped her. Thank you, he said quietly. For what, Chief? For showing me what I needed to see. For being brave enough to eat from my plate. He chuckled softly. Sometimes it takes desperate acts to open blind eyes. Amara ducked her head, but not before he saw her smile. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a lone bird called, perhaps heralding rain, perhaps just singing its evening song. Either way, change was coming, and this time, it tasted of hope. The first month of transformation brought challenges no one had anticipated. The Western warehouse, once filled with export goods, now echoed with different sounds. The shuffle of hungry families, the crying of babies, the murmur of village elders debating whether to trust this sudden change in Chief Okoro. Amara, promoted to assistant coordinator, watched her employer wrestle with the logistics. The loading dock, designed for trucks, proved difficult for villagers arriving on foot or with donkey carts. The inventory system, built for bulk shipping, struggled to handle small-scale distribution. These forms, an elderly woman complained one morning, holding up paperwork with trembling hands. How can we fill these when half of us cannot read? Chief Okoro, who had taken to spending mornings at the warehouse, overheard. The proud merchant who once dismissed such concerns now sat with the woman, listening. By afternoon, he had Amara designing a simpler system using thumbprints and pictograms. But bigger problems loomed. Word spread through the merchant community, and not everyone approved of Chief Okoro's madness. You're undermining the entire market, accused merchant Adebayo, storming into the office one day. His gold chains jangled with every angry gesture. People in my district are asking why I don't open a distribution center. My own workers are getting ideas. Behind her desk, Amara watched Chief Okoro's face remain calm. Perhaps they're good ideas, brother. Perhaps it's time. Time for what? To destroy everything we've built? To turn merchants into beggars? Adebayo spat on the floor. You've gone soft, Okoro. The drought has addled your brain. After he left, Chief Okoro sat heavily in his chair. He's not wrong about one thing, he murmured. The drought has changed me, but not in the way he thinks. The warehouse brought its own daily challenges. Despite Chibueze's careful planning, they underestimated demand. Lines grew longer. Tempers flared in the heat. Some days they ran out of supplies before noon. We need more storage space, Amara reported one evening, her ledger filled with calculations. And the road from the eastern villages, it's too damaged for regular deliveries. Chief Okoro nodded, adding these to his growing list of problems. But his biggest challenge came from an unexpected quarter, the villagers themselves. Why should we trust him? Amara overheard one elder asking another. Yesterday he was throwing away food while we starved. Today he plays savior. What changed? The skepticism ran deep. Years of neglect and broken promises had taught the villages to be wary of wealthy merchants bearing gifts. Some suspected a political scheme. Others whispered about hidden motives. Even in Amara's own village, doubts surfaced. He'll tire of this game soon enough, predicted one woman at the well. Men like him don't change their spots. The criticism seemed to pain Chief Okoro more than the logistics or the angry merchants. How do I prove this isn't a game? He asked Amara one night, looking older than his years. How do I show them this is real? Before she could answer, more complications arrived in the form of a government inspection. Officials, alerted by competing merchants, descended on the warehouse citing concerns about unauthorized food distribution and market disruption. The inspector, a thin man with suspicious eyes, spent hours examining their records. This operation lacks proper permits, he announced finally, and these storage conditions, they don't meet regulations. Regulations designed for export warehouses, not community distribution, Chief Okoro argued. Surely there's a difference. The law is the law. The inspector closed his notebook with a snap. You have 1 week to comply or shut down. That evening, Chibueze arrived with worse news. Their suppliers in Lagos were getting nervous. They're worried about association with charitable activities, he reported delicately. Some are threatening to cancel contracts. Amara watched Chief Okoro absorb these blows, seeing not the powerful merchant, but a man trying to navigate between two worlds. The weight of it showed in his shoulders, in the new lines around his eyes. But then something unexpected happened. As word of their troubles spread, people began arriving at the warehouse, not for food, but to help. Village women organized the lines more efficiently than any system they'd devised. A retired teacher offered to help with paperwork. Young men volunteered to repair the eastern road. Most surprisingly, Taiwo arrived one morning with architect's drawings. My wife's brother, he explained. He says we can modify the warehouse to meet regulations without disrupting distribution, if you're still determined to continue this. Chief Okoro studied the plans, then looked around the warehouse. Despite the challenges, despite the opposition, people kept coming. Not just for food now, but for hope, for change. Continue? He smiled slightly. Brother, we haven't even properly begun. That evening, as Amara prepared to leave, she found him still at his desk, surrounded by papers, permits, regulations, contracts, problems to solve. But he was humming softly, a village song she recognized, a song about rain returning to dry land. Sir, she ventured, are you worried about what Merchant Adebayo said, about destroying everything you've built? Chief Okoro looked up, and his eyes held a peace she'd never seen before. No, Amara. For the first time, I'm actually building something worth keeping. Outside, the sunset painted the warehouse gold, while inside, despite all odds, a new kind of business was taking root. One measured not in profit margins, but in lives changed. The road ahead was still uncertain, but at least now they were walking it together. The crisis hit during the driest season anyone could remember. The sun rose like a curse each morning, baking the earth until it cracked like broken pottery. Wells that had never failed before ran dry. Even the hardy baobabs dropped their leaves, surrendering to the relentless heat. It was during this time that Chief Okoro's distribution center faced its greatest test. The line outside the warehouse stretched further than Amara had ever seen, snaking through the dusty streets like a river of desperate humanity. Children slept in their mothers' arms as they waited. Elderly villagers leaned on walking sticks, their faces etched with worry. The morning air hummed with tension. "We don't have enough," Chibueze announced grimly, checking their dwindling supplies. "At this rate, we'll be empty by noon, and our next shipment isn't due for 3 days." Chief Okoro stood at the warehouse entrance, watching the crowd grow. His face had grown leaner these past months, the gold rings long since sold to fund their operation. But his eyes held a different kind of wealth now. Determination. "Call every supplier we know," he ordered. "Use my personal accounts if necessary, and send word to the villages. Tell them we're not closing until everyone gets something, even if I have to empty my own kitchen." As Amara helped organize the distribution, a commotion arose at the gate. Merchant Adebayo had arrived with several other wealthy traders, their expensive cars raising dust clouds that made the waiting villagers cough. "Come to see the great Chief Okoro's failure?" Adebayo called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Come to watch your foolish charity collapse." But something unexpected happened. Before Chief Okoro could respond, the villagers themselves turned to face the merchants. Mama Zainab, who had been quietly helping organize the children, stepped forward. "You call this failure?" Her voice carried clearly across the yard. "Look around you. In my village, no one has died of hunger this season. For the first time in years, our children go to school with food in their bellies. If this is failure, then perhaps we need more such failures." Other voices joined hers. A farmer spoke of how the center's fair prices had helped him keep his land. A young mother told of how her baby had survived because of the supplemental food program. The teacher mentioned how attendance had improved now that children weren't too hungry to concentrate. The wealthy merchants shifted uncomfortably as more stories poured forth. Then something remarkable occurred. Taiwo, who had been standing quietly among them, stepped away from his peers. "My warehouse in the Eastern District," he said slowly. "It's half empty since the drought affected exports. Perhaps it could be put to better use." A murmur ran through the crowd. Adebayo's face darkened with anger, but another merchant, then another, looked thoughtful. Inside the warehouse, the day became a battle against time and dwindling resources. Chief Okoro worked alongside everyone else, carrying sacks, measuring portions, ensuring every family received something, even if the portions grew smaller as the day progressed. By late afternoon, when it seemed they would have to start turning people away, an unexpected convoy arrived. 3 trucks laden with supplies pulled up to the loading dock. Behind them came more vehicles, merchants who had witnessed the day's events bringing contributions from their own warehouses. "We can't have Okoro showing us all up, can we?" one of them joked, but his eyes were serious as he watched families receiving food. The sun was setting when the last family was served. Chief Okoro, exhausted but satisfied, sat on a crate watching the crowd disperse. Amara brought him water, noticing how his hands trembled slightly. "Sir," she said softly, "look." In the fading light, something extraordinary was happening. Instead of rushing home with their supplies, people were sharing. Those who had received more were giving to those who had less. Village women were organizing cooking groups to make the food stretch further. The warehouse yard had become a community. "I see it," Chief Okoro whispered. "I finally see it." The next day, more changes came. Merchants who had opposed them now sent representatives to learn about their distribution system. Village elders who had been skeptical offered to help coordinate between communities. Even the government inspector returned, this time with proposals for adapting regulations to support similar centers. But the real turning point came a week later. During a meeting of the Merchants Association, Adebayo himself stood up. "I still think you're all crazy," he announced. "But—" He paused, struggling with the words. "My mother lives in one of the villages you serve. She told me I should be ashamed that her son had forgotten where he came from." He squared his shoulders. "My warehouse in the Western District. It's yours if you want it. Show me how to do this right." That evening, as Amara updated their ledgers, now recording not just supplies and distributions, but lives touched and communities strengthened. She found Chief Okoro standing at his old office window. But he wasn't looking at his garden anymore. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, where the first clouds in months were gathering. "You know what my mother used to say?" he mused. "She said wealth is like rain. It's only a blessing if it nourishes everyone's fields, not just your own." Outside, the first drops began to fall, pattering on the tin roof of the warehouse where so much had changed. Each drop seemed to whisper, "Sometimes the greatest abundance comes not from what we keep, but from what we're willing to share." The drought wasn't over, but something had broken, not just in the sky, but in the hearts of those who had once thought wealth could only be measured in gold. The seasons turned, and with them, the landscape of both land and lives transformed. What had begun as one desperate maid's hunger and one merchant's awakening had grown into something neither could have imagined. Amara no longer walked the mansion's halls with downcast eyes. Now she strode purposefully through a network of distribution centers, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had found her calling. The other workers, many from her own village, looked to her not just as a coordinator, but as living proof that change was possible. "Show me the new system again," Chief Okoro requested one morning, watching as she demonstrated the improved registration process. Her innovations had streamlined their operations across all three centers: Taiwo's warehouse in the east, Adebayo's in the west, and their original central location. "See how the family cards are color-coded?" Amara explained, her confidence a far cry from the trembling maid she'd once been. Blue for those needing regular support, yellow for seasonal assistance, green for those who can pay reduced rates. "And here," she pointed to a new column in the ledger, "we track what skills or services they can offer in exchange." This had been her idea, transforming charity into partnership. Farmers who received seeds now shared their harvests. Women who got flour taught others to bake. The centers had become more than just distribution points. They were becoming hubs of community exchange. Chief Okoro nodded approvingly. "You've thought of everything. Though I shouldn't be surprised, you've always seen what the rest of us missed." The comment made Amara pause, remembering the desperate girl who'd eaten from his plate that fateful night. "We all had to learn to see differently," she said softly. The transformation wasn't limited to their operations. The very fabric of society was shifting. At the monthly merchant meetings, village elders now sat alongside wealthy traders. Women who had once been too intimidated to speak up now contributed confidently to discussions about resource allocation and community needs. Even the physical boundaries between social classes had begun to blur. When Mama Zainab fell ill, it was Merchant Adebayo's wife who brought her special herbs and sat with her through the night. When Taiwo's son married, the entire village celebrated, sharing traditional dishes alongside the fancy catered food. "Remember how they used to call this madness?" Chibuez mused one evening, reviewing the quarterly reports. The numbers told a story beyond profit and loss. Infant mortality down, school attendance up, new small businesses sprouting like grass after rain. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some merchants still resisted, clinging to old ways. Some families abused the system, requiring Amara to make difficult decisions. Yet even these challenges served a purpose, forcing them to refine their methods to build stronger foundations. One morning, as Amara supervised the unloading of supplies, she overheard two village women talking. "My daughter wants to be like Amara when she grows up. Better that than dreaming of being a rich man's wife. Times really have changed." The conversation warmed her heart, but also reminded her of how far they'd come. She remembered the days when success meant escaping the village, not transforming it. Chief Okoro, too, had changed. The gold rings never returned to his fingers, replaced by the calluses of honest work. His mansion, once a symbol of separation from common folk, now hosted regular community meetings. The garden where he'd once grown exotic flowers now produced vegetables for the feeding program. "You know what surprises me most?" he said to Amara one evening as they watched the sunset from the warehouse roof. "Not the success of the centers, or even how the other merchants came around. It's how much richer I feel now that I've stopped counting my wealth in money. Amara understood. Her own wealth now lay in the respect she'd earned, the lives she'd touched, the bridges she'd helped build between worlds that once seemed impossibly far apart. As darkness fell, lights began twinkling in the village, more lights than before, as prosperity slowly returned. But more striking than the physical brightness was the light of hope that now illuminated faces that had long known only shadow. The drought had eased, but the real transformation had little to do with rain. It was in the way people now looked at each other, spoke to each other, helped each other. The distribution centers had become more than places of giving and receiving. They were proof that the greatest abundance comes from sharing not just resources, but dignity, opportunity, and respect. And Amara, watching the lights below, knew that this was just the beginning. 5 years to the day since Amara had eaten from Chief Okoro's plate, she stood beside him on a makeshift platform, watching the sunrise paint the sky over their newest distribution center. This one, their 12th, marked something special. It was in the most remote village of their network, a place where hope had once been as scarce as rain. "Ready?" Chief Okoro asked softly, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. The years had silvered his hair completely now, but his eyes held the same fire that had sparked that day he first visited her village. He no longer wore expensive suits. His simple traditional attire matched the dignity he'd found in service. "Almost," Amara replied, adjusting the papers for her speech. She'd grown into her role as executive director of their now sprawling network of community centers, but some part of her still marveled at the journey from maid to leader. The crowd gathering below reflected their success, not just in numbers, but in the healthy faces, the straight backs, the eyes that looked forward instead of down. Children who had once been too hungry to learn now ran a successful youth farming program. Women who had once waited in food lines now managed micro-lending circles. "Do you remember," Chief Okoro mused, "how Chibueze used to say we'd bankrupt ourselves within a year?" Amara smiled. Chibueze himself was now overseeing 3 centers in the eastern region, having discovered that compassionate business could be more profitable than pure profit-seeking. His ledgers tracked not just financial capital, but social impact, environmental restoration, and community resilience. The ceremony began with traditional prayers, but it was the personal testimonies that moved everyone most. A grandmother spoke of how her grandchildren now attended university, thanks to the education fund. A young man described how the agricultural training program had helped him reclaim his family's abandoned farm. When it was Amara's turn to speak, she looked out at the faces, familiar and new, rich and poor, young and old, all part of the tapestry they'd woven together. 5 years ago, she began, I was starving in a house full of food. Today, we stand in a community full of abundance, not just of food, but of hope, of dignity, of purpose. We've learned that true wealth isn't in what we possess, but in what we share. She felt Chief Okoro's quiet pride as she spoke. Their relationship had evolved into something neither had expected, a bond that transcended employer and employee, mentor and protege. He'd become the father she'd lost too young. She'd become the daughter he'd never had. After the ceremony, as the celebration continued around them, they walked together through the new center. Every detail reflected lessons learned over 5 years, the efficient layout, the community meeting spaces, the training rooms, the children's corner. "You've exceeded every dream I had," Chief Okoro said suddenly, stopping in the main hall. "When I first saw what my wealth had blinded me to, I thought perhaps we could help a few villages survive. But you saw how to help communities thrive." Amara touched the wall of the center, solid, real, promising. "We saw it together," she corrected gently, "and we're not finished seeing yet." Outside, the afternoon sun gilded the landscape where crops now grew in once barren fields. The sound of children laughing floated on the breeze. In the distance, new buildings rose, signs of growth, of life returning. "No," Chief Okoro agreed, smiling at the daughter of his heart, "we're not finished yet. This is still just the beginning." And in that moment, standing in the light of what they'd built together, both knew that some hungers go deeper than food, some wealth can't be counted in gold, and some families are forged not by blood, but by a shared vision of a world where no one goes hungry, while others feast. The real miracle wasn't just that they'd changed their world, it was that in doing so, they'd found their true selves. Thank you for watching till the end. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories grow when they're shared. See you in the next one.